In New Jersey, at my uncle's funeral, an unexpected revelation ignites a deep family conflict. The day of my Uncle Arthur's funeral should have been about mourning, but instead, it was the day my world crumbled. I had always known that my relationship with my uncle had been strained. He had been a successful businessman with a sharp mind, but he and I had never seen eye to eye. His wealth, his control over the family, it all created distance between us. Still, I thought, at the very least I would be included in his will. After all, I was his niece, but as the lawyer read through the will, my stomach dropped. There, in front of my cousins and aunt, my name wasn't mentioned once. Not a penny, not a piece of property, nothing. The entirety of his estate was bequeathed to my cousin Rachel and her husband Carl. They were practically glowing with excitement as the lawyer finished reading. Rachel, the one who had always been his favourite, stood there, her lips twisted in a smug smile. I caught her eye for a split second. Triumph. It was a public humiliation, a slap in the face, and a gut-wrenching betrayal. My uncle, a man who I'd respected for his sharp wit, had used his final moments to punish me for... What? For never kissing up to him? For not playing the part of a grateful niece? I couldn't believe it. It didn't make sense. I was furious. As the family began to leave the funeral service, Rachel and Carl lingered behind, discussing the estate with the lawyer in hushed tones. I stood by, still in shock. The truth was, I had no intention of letting this stand. I wasn't going to just walk away. I would find out why my uncle had done this to me. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, and I would make sure the family knew the truth. But for now, I had to hold it together. The funeral was still in full swing, and my mother was already on her way over looking for me. She would be devastated by the news, and I wasn't sure I could tell her without completely breaking down. The following day, I sat alone in the family home, the place where Uncle Arthur had lived for years. The air felt thick with tension, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. My mother had gone to stay with Aunt Linda, hoping to find some comfort, while I was left to process the fallout of the will. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just a simple oversight. My uncle was meticulous in everything he did. There had to be a reason behind this. I found myself standing in his study, the one room of the house he'd always kept locked. The large mahogany desk in the centre of the room seemed almost untouched, its surface perfectly neat. It felt like a betrayal too, this room, so pristine, so impersonal. I ran my hand across the surface, scanning the room for anything out of place. My eyes caught a faint reflection in the corner of the room. It was a small drawer, barely noticeable under the desk. With trembling fingers I opened it. Inside was a bundle of papers, each one neatly folded. I flicked through them, my heart pounding as I realised what they were. Old letters. One of them was from a solicitor, dated a few months before Uncle Arthur's death. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why had he hidden these? Why hadn't anyone mentioned this during the reading of the will? I quickly scanned the letter, feeling my pulse quicken. It was discussing something called a secondary beneficiary, a term that wasn't mentioned in the will. It was a legal term, and it seemed to suggest that there was a hidden clause in the estate's distribution. The letter was brief but clear. The secondary beneficiary had to come forward to claim their inheritance. My mind raced. This had to be it, the reason why I'd been cut out. But who was the secondary beneficiary? And why was I left in the dark? I knew I had to find out, and I had to act quickly before Rachel or Carl uncovered the truth themselves. I felt a strange mix of hope and fear. If I was right, this could be the key to reclaiming what was mine. But at the same time, it could also be a trap, one that I wasn't yet ready to fall into. With a new lead in hand, I seek answers from my uncle's lawyer, but the truth comes at a cost. The more I stared at the letter, the clearer it became that this secondary beneficiary was my only hope. But the more questions I had, the more I realised I was walking into unfamiliar territory. I needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to me, Julian Turner, my uncle's lawyer. He was the one who had read the will at the funeral, the one who had administered Uncle Arthur's estate for years. He'd always been professional, even distant, but I never thought he could be a part of the puzzle that was slowly coming together in my mind. I called his office first thing the next morning. The receptionist answered, and I explained that I needed to speak with Mr. Turner about my uncle's will. She seemed hesitant, but assured me that he'd be in later that day. I decided to take the chance and show up unannounced. I had to see him face to face, read his body language, look him in the eyes as I asked about the secondary beneficiary. When I arrived at his office, the polished glass building felt cold and impersonal, much like the lawyer himself. I was escorted into a waiting room that felt more like a corporate showroom than a place where family matters were settled. After a few minutes, Julian appeared, his greying hair neatly combed and his suit sharp. He gave me a polite nod and gestured for me to sit. "Miss Roberts, I wasn't expecting you today," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I need to know about the secondary beneficiary." His eyebrows furrowed, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. "I'm afraid I can't disclose such details, Miss Roberts. The will is a matter of confidentiality." I leaned forward, pressing him harder. "I know about the letter. I know there's something more. I need to know who it is, Julian." There was a long pause. He looked away, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. For a moment I thought he might shut me down completely, but then he sighed. "You're persistent, I'll give you that. But you're asking about something that's complicated." He hesitated again, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Your uncle had made certain provisions in his later years. These provisions were tied to a trust he set up long ago. The secondary beneficiary was someone he trusted deeply, someone who wasn't made public knowledge." My heart raced. "Who is it?" Julian's eyes flickered. "I can't say, Miss Roberts. It's not that simple." I stood up, determined. "Then I'll find out on my own." I turned to leave, but before I could reach the door, Julian spoke again. "It might be in your best interest to tread carefully. There are things in that trust that could change the way you see everything." I paused, my hand on the door handle. His words hung in the air like a warning, but I wasn't backing down. "I'll decide what's in my best interest." I walked out of the office, my mind spinning. Julian knew more than he was letting on. And now I had to find the trust, the real truth behind my uncle's final wishes, before it was too late. Just when I think I've uncovered the truth, a public confrontation turns the tables and leaves me questioning everything. It wasn't long before I managed to track down the trust documents. After a lot of persistence, I managed to convince a former employee of my uncle's, someone who'd worked with him on his personal affairs, to give me access to his files. The man was hesitant, but when I mentioned the will and the secondary beneficiary, he relented and handed over a large manila envelope, its contents wrapped in the same sterile air of secrecy that had surrounded my uncle's life. I didn't waste any time. As soon as I was in my car, I began flipping through the documents. They were dense, full of legal jargon and financial details. But there it was, a letter from my uncle, tucked away in the back, alongside a clause marked in bold, "Special Bequest." It referred to a particular heir who would receive the lion's share of the estate under certain conditions that hadn't been met yet. The secondary beneficiary, it seemed, wasn't just a name, but a person who had to fulfill a task my uncle had set. The deeper I read, the more I realised how intricate this trust was. The conditions weren't just financial, they were personal, tied to something my uncle had been obsessed with in his final years, a family heirloom, a ring, that my uncle believed carried some deep personal significance. I had no idea what this heirloom was, but I knew it had to be more than just a trinket. My uncle had been known for his obsession with family history, with legacy, and this ring had to be the key to unlocking everything. I was sure of it. But just as I was processing all this, the situation took an unexpected turn. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Rachel. She wanted to meet. Her tone was unusually friendly, almost too friendly, and I immediately suspected something was off. When I arrived at the coffee shop she'd chosen, she was already seated, her eyes glinting with that same smugness I'd seen at the funeral. She greeted me with a saccharine smile and handed me a folder. "I thought you might like to see these," she said. Inside the folder were copies of the same trust documents I'd just read. But what stood out were the final pages, the ones I hadn't seen before, the ones I thought were hidden. And there it was, in black and white, a provision that said the secondary beneficiary must publicly renounce any claim to the estate within 30 days of the will's reading. I stared at her, feeling the world shift beneath my feet. Rachel had been holding back more than I realised. She had known about this clause all along, and what's worse, she was forcing me into a corner, to make a choice I hadn't been prepared to face. "What are you trying to do, Rachel?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "I'm just letting you know, Ellie, that you have a decision to make. You can either walk away with nothing, like you're supposed to, or you can fight, and lose everything." Her words stung, and for the first time I felt truly trapped. The pressure was on and the clock was ticking. If I didn't renounce my claim within 30 days, I would lose any hope of inheriting anything from my uncle's estate. And that ring, my only shot at figuring out the truth, was slipping away, possibly forever. I stood up, pushing the folder away. "You can keep your game, Rachel." "I'm not backing down." She smiled, but there was a hardness in her eyes. "We'll see." I walked out of the cafe with my heart pounding. The stakes had just gotten much higher, and I had no idea how much time I really had left. But I wasn't giving up. As the deadline looms, I struggle to gather the pieces of the puzzle. But a deeper betrayal waits around the corner. The days blurred together in a rush of frantic phone calls, endless research, and a constant gnawing feeling that the walls were closing in. I couldn't ignore the ticking clock. Rachel had made it clear. If I didn't renounce my claim, I would lose everything. But walking away felt like surrender, like giving up on my uncle's legacy, and on the very notion of family justice. I tried to reach out to the people who might know something more, anyone who had been close to my uncle in his final years. But one by one they turned their backs. My own mother, consumed by grief over her brother's passing, was less than helpful. She'd never been close to Arthur either, and seemed willing to let it all go, to let Rachel and Carl have it all. It frustrated me more than I could express. I sought out old family friends, former colleagues of my uncle, anyone who might shed light on the mysterious heirloom. But every lead either went cold or led to dead ends. No one seemed to remember anything important about the heirloom my uncle had been obsessed with in his last years. No one could even recall where it might be. My frustration mounted, and I felt more and more isolated, cut off from the support I needed. The weight of my uncle's betrayal, the looming deadline, and the growing pressure from Rachel was taking its toll. I started to doubt everything. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe I was better off walking away. Maybe my uncle had truly intended to punish me, to leave me with nothing. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't worth fighting for, that I didn't need the money or the property, that my uncle's wealth didn't define me. But every time I thought about it, something inside me rebelled. I couldn't let Rachel win. I couldn't just let her take everything with no consequences. Then, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Julian Turner, the lawyer. It was brief, but the words sent a chill down my spine. "Miss Roberts, I have something of importance to discuss with you. Please come to my office at your earliest convenience. I believe you need to hear this directly from me." My mind raced. Had Julian finally decided to help me? Was he going to tell me about the heirloom? Or worse, had Rachel already gotten to him? The possibility that Rachel had somehow manipulated him was more than I could bear. I had to know what was going on, and I had to know now. When I arrived at Julian's office, he looked more serious than I had ever seen him. He didn't greet me with his usual professionalism. There was something more guarded in his eyes. "Miss Roberts," he said, his voice lower than normal. "I didn't want to tell you this over the phone, but I'm afraid I have bad news." I braced myself. "What is it?" "The heirloom you're searching for," he said, his voice tense. "It's no longer in your uncle's possession." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Julian hesitated before speaking again. "Rachel has it. It's been in her hands for months now. The floor seemed to fall out from under me. Rachel had known about the heirloom all along, and she'd kept it hidden. My whole pursuit, my whole belief that there was something left to uncover, it had all been a lie." I felt the walls closing in again. Julian's words echoed in my mind as he spoke more about how the heirloom had been handed to Rachel before my uncle's death, how she had claimed it under the guise of caretaking it for him. It was all part of the trust's conditions. Suddenly it all clicked. Rachel had planned this. She knew about the will, about the secondary beneficiary clause, and she had worked with Julian to ensure I never got a chance. I felt a rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Betrayed by my family, by the people I had trusted the most. And yet there was one thing I still had. The ring. I hadn't given up yet. There had to be a way to take it back. An unexpected ally offers a lifeline. And I make a plan to turn the tables on Rachel and reclaim what's mine. In the days after Julian's revelation, I felt like a puppet, strung along by forces I couldn't control. The rage I'd been suppressing simmered just below the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. The weight of Rachel's deception crushed me, but I couldn't give in. There had to be a way to get back what was mine, even if it meant playing her game. Just as I was about to lose hope entirely, an unexpected source of help came forward. It wasn't Rachel, Carl, or even Julian. It was Aunt Linda. Aunt Linda had always been a quiet, gentle presence in the family, someone who rarely spoke up and tended to stay out of the drama. But she and my uncle had shared a bond that no one ever talked about. They had grown up together, and she had always been the one person who seemed to understand him. So, when she called me late one evening, her voice trembling but determined, I knew something had changed. "I've been thinking, Ellie," she began, her tone soft yet resolute. "Your uncle trusted me with something important, something that Rachel doesn't know about." I sat up straighter, my pulse quickening. "What are you talking about, Aunt Linda?" "There's more to the heirloom, more than what Rachel has told you," she explained. "It's not just a piece of jewellery. Your uncle left instructions for it, and there's a special clause about its true ownership. It's in a different trust." My mind raced. "What do you mean, a different trust?" "There was a secondary document," Aunt Linda continued, "one your uncle drafted after he started suspecting Rachel's intentions. He wasn't entirely fooled by her. This other trust, Ellie, it's what she doesn't know about. It holds the final say on the heirloom. If you can find it, you can claim what's rightfully yours." My heart skipped a beat. Could this really be true? Could there actually be another trust, one that Rachel hadn't yet uncovered? But where is it? "How do I find it?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Aunt Linda hesitated, then whispered, "Your uncle kept a copy of everything in a safe deposit box. I know where it is, Ellie. I've been to that box before. But I'll only help you if you're sure you want to take this on." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. She was offering me a chance to fight back, to take control of my uncle's legacy. But it wouldn't come without consequences. If Rachel found out that Aunt Linda had helped me, it would destroy whatever was left of the family. I knew this was a risky move, but I had no choice. This was my only shot. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice steady, filled with the resolve I had lacked only days before. Aunt Linda agreed to meet me the following day at the bank, where the safe deposit box was kept. The plan was simple. We'd get the documents, and with them, I would finally have the leverage I needed. But as I hung up the phone, a feeling of unease settled over me. This could work, but it could also be another trap, another betrayal waiting to unfold. I had to stay sharp. Rachel had already shown she was willing to play dirty. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. The truth about my uncle's legacy comes to light, and I finally confront Rachel in a way she never expected. The next morning, Aunt Linda and I made our way to the bank. The air was thick with tension as we entered, the sterile hum of the place doing nothing to calm my nerves. I kept my eyes trained on Aunt Linda, watching her every movement, trying to gauge if this was really the help I needed or another step into a deeper mess. I had to trust her, even though the stakes were higher than ever. We arrived at the safe deposit area, where the clerk led us to the box. Aunt Linda had the key, and I could feel my pulse quicken as the lock turned. The metal box slid open, revealing a stack of documents wrapped in a faded leather folder. I felt a mixture of hope and dread. This was it, the moment that could change everything. "Here," Aunt Linda said, pulling the papers out with a careful hand. "This is your uncle's final will, the one he never showed anyone, the one Rachel never knew about." I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. This was it, the trust that would give me the power to fight back. The folder was thick, filled with pages of legal jargon, but it was unmistakably my uncle's handwriting at the top of the first page. The text outlined the terms of the heirloom's ownership, and stated clearly that only a member of the family who had been excluded by the first will could claim it, as long as they proved their worth by completing a task that tested loyalty to the family name. My uncle had suspected Rachel all along, and he'd created a test for her and for me. But more than that, the trust stated that the heirloom, once reclaimed, could be passed on to the rightful heir by a family vote, something Rachel had no idea was even part of the plan. I glanced at Aunt Linda, feeling the gravity of what I had just learned. "This is it," I said softly. "This is the leverage I need." She nodded, her eyes flickering with a mix of satisfaction and concern. "Just remember, Ellie, that winning this battle won't be easy. You'll have to play the game carefully. Rachel won't give up the heirloom without a fight." I was more determined than ever. Armed with the knowledge that I could challenge Rachel legally, I left the bank with the folder in hand, my mind already racing with plans. It was time to confront her. Time to make her face the consequences of her actions. When I arrived at her house, I didn't waste time on pleasantries. Rachel answered the door with that same smug smile, as though she already knew she had won. But this time I wasn't going to let her dictate the pace. "I need to speak to you," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. Rachel raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "What now, Ellie? Still trying to fight a losing battle?" I held up the folder, letting it catch the light. "This is your uncle's second will, Rachel. The one you didn't know about." Her face shifted, the smile dropping as she glanced at the papers. "What is that?" she asked, her voice suddenly defensive. "This," I said, stepping closer, "is the key to everything. The heirloom you've been hiding? It's mine, not because I say so, but because the law says so." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She knew what this meant. The trust, the family vote, everything, it was all out in the open now. "You can't win this, Ellie," Rachel finally sneered. "You don't have the family's support. They'll side with me." I shook my head. "You underestimate me. You've always done that." With that I turned and walked away, leaving Rachel standing there, the truth sinking in. I had the documents. I had the proof. And now I had the leverage to make sure that justice would be done. The following days felt like a blur. Rachel had no choice but to call a family meeting, as stipulated by the terms of the will. The heirloom, the family legacy, and the trust's condition were all on the table now. Rachel's smugness had vanished, replaced by a barely concealed panic. She knew she was about to lose everything she'd worked so hard to secure. The family gathered in the old family estate, the house that had once been full of laughter and love. Now it was filled with tension, every person in the room keenly aware of what was at stake. My mother sat quietly at the table, her face lined with grief but also with a sense of recognition. She had finally come to understand the magnitude of what my uncle had done. We sat in a circle, Rachel at the head of the table, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Aunt Linda sat beside me, her expression calm but serious, and Julian, the lawyer, stood to the side, ready to act as mediator. It was time to settle this once and for all. "I trust we're all here because we want to resolve this matter fairly," Julian began, his voice smooth but with a hint of tension. "We're here to vote on the rightful owner of the heirloom, according to your uncle's final wishes." Rachel shot me a look, one that seemed to say she had no intention of letting this go. She was about to speak, but I raised my hand to silence her. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to claim what was mine. I stood up, holding the trust documents in front of me. My uncle left clear instructions. The heirloom belongs to the rightful family member, the one excluded from the first will, and that's me. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Rachel's face turned crimson, her anger barely contained. "You can't just take it, Ellie. The family will never support you." But it was too late. The family had already seen the truth. Aunt Linda spoke first, her voice steady but firm. "Ellie has a right to it, Rachel, and I'm voting for her." My mother, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "I've seen enough of Rachel's manipulation. It's time someone stood up to her. I'm voting for Ellie." One by one, the family members who had once been swayed by Rachel's charm began to speak up. Carl, her husband, tried to defend her, but even he couldn't deny the truth of my uncle's intentions. The vote was unanimous. "Ellie," Julian said, his voice carrying the weight of the decision, "you are the rightful owner of the heirloom. You've proven yourself. It's yours to claim." I felt a rush of triumph, but more than that, it was a deep sense of vindication. The betrayal, the lies, it had all come full circle, and now I had what was rightfully mine. But the journey wasn't just about the heirloom. It was about reclaiming my place in the family, proving that integrity and justice could still win, no matter how much someone tried to take from you. As I left the meeting, the heirloom safely in my hands, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief. Rachel had lost everything, not just the heirloom, but her reputation within the family. Her betrayal had cost her more than I could have imagined. In the end, justice had been served. Not through vengeance or violence, but through truth, perseverance, and the will to fight for what was right. Author's note: this story is a testament to the power of standing up for oneself, even when the odds seem impossible. While the road to justice is often long and fraught with setbacks, the resolution lies in the ability to navigate through adversity with integrity. The karmic ending serves as a reminder that those who manipulate and deceive may win for a time, but truth always finds its way to the surface.